So we have an amazing panel. We have Theo, who is going to join us from Fridays for Future, who's been an amazing activist and has experience of attending COP. We also have Claire Gough. Claire was working with Máquina Firma and is going to tell us a little bit about her experiences of being at COP previously. And also we're joined by MARUŠKA MILETA. So Theo and Claire are both bringing Irish perspectives, and MARUŠKA is actually joining us from Croatia, and MARUŠKA has a long experience working with and volunteering as a youth activist with Young Friends of the Earth Europe, and that's how we met years ago. Yeah, so we're going to hear a variety of different experiences from our panelists and from their various kinds of engagement both inside and outside the COP, which I think will help give us another perspective. So Ruth really painted a clear picture of some of the challenges, some of the opportunities of engaging with the climate talks and different kinds of issues in terms of youth participation. But I think what we hope to gather from our panelists is, you know, their perspectives, their ideas, the creativity that they've brought, and some of the challenges and obstacles that they themselves have faced. So what we are going to do is try to offer each of our panelists about 5 minutes to be able to give us a little bit of input on their experience. And we'll hear from each person first, and then we'll open the floor and we'll be able to invite comments and questions from everybody, from all participants, if that sounds okay. So Claire, I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Claire Gough. I am 27 years old, so I'm kind of still a young person, but still on the other end, unfortunately. But I'm from Askboy in County Meath. I'm a member of MACRA. So for people who don't know, MACRA is a rural youth organisation for 17 to 35-year-olds. We incorporate different aspects of social activity, rural activity, agricultural activity, and the likes. We kind of something for everyone. So I joined MACRA back in 2011. Now I'm currently the Leinster Vice, so I'm kind of over the Leinster region and to try and develop the club. I am currently on the Rural Youth Committee, on the Sustainable Development Goals working group within the Rural Youth Committee. My internet connection is slightly off, so I hope it's coming today. We are currently working within the Sustainable Development Group. We're currently working on the promotion of Sustainable Development Goals and how relevant they are to the work that MACRA does and how we can go further and challenge ourselves from that point. On my COP experience, listening to Ruth, it really resonated at her first experience, how green I was. And your mind is something, but then when you go, it kind of is completely different in ways. So MACRA was given the opportunity to have some young people represent at COP25 in Madrid, and I jumped at the chance because it sounds like such a great experience where you can learn a lot, and like that's my main goal for my experience. Like I wouldn't call myself necessarily a climate activist when I listen to the other people talking today. I feel like I might not do the title of it justice, but I do do my best in all the areas I can, but I'm not perfect. And I suppose COP25 really helped me kind of get the people in different countries and helped me realize at what point I was and how I could go further than that. And that was really the idea of COP25, to help us realize in MACRA where we are, where we can be, and how we get there. And as a organization, when we went to COP, we kind of didn't really know what to expect because none of us we had 3 people go from MACRA, and we'd never experienced it, any of us, before. We were delighted to get the opportunity, and we kind of thought there would be a bigger Irish representation at COP. There seemed to be a lot of countries that had stands and everything, but Ireland it wasn't there. And that was a disappointment for us. But then we had hopes that we would meet similar organizations to MARUŠKA around the world. And then we didn't really, but it was actually more beneficial for us because it wasn't so much about how similar we were. It was really measuring up the differences between each of the organizations and how successful other organizations were with doing completely different things, and a lot of the time dealing with less resources than we had available to us, and how it made us realize how lucky we are for what we have and what we do right. But also, it just amazed us with how little people deal with and how they make something so brilliant and so beautiful. And it just was a fantastic experience from the communication point of view and the discussion with the other groups and with the sessions. It was just fantastic from that point of view, and it really kind of enlightened us. The amount of young people at COP25 was amazing. I didn't know how much of a young representation we would have, and how much the discussions would be focused on young people. And that was I tried to attend a lot of the discussions around young people and that were given by young people, because that kind of resonates with our organization more so. And I think the discussions where the young people were present were a lot more real and relevant to the organization. And listening to Ruth, she just kind of touched on a lot of things that I kind of can feel and I can remember back from my experience, because it seems like so long ago, and when I was listening to her, I was like, God, it makes you think again. But it just seems so much easier to understand and so much easier to implement what all the young people were discussing, but also how amazing they were and how what they did but had such an impact and will continue to have an impact because they're growing with it and they're developing with it. And I think that's what we had brought back to MARUŠKA and to try and encourage the changes to be made, and that if we make an impact at the level we're at, like we do with 17 to 35-year-old age group, we have a much further reach because of the age we're starting to make an impact and starting to make the realization. And we're definitely not perfect from an organization point of view, but it's all about for us making the small changes that can make us a better organization from a climate point of view, but a better organization from an education point of view of educating the members and educating the next generation. So for us, that was my experience.
Thank you so much for that, Claire. I think it's really valuable to hear your input and your experience. And yeah, I think also the work that MARUŠKA does as well. I think it is interesting that you reflected that you found it difficult to connect with other youth organizations. So actually it'd be really interesting afterwards that we connect you in with Ruth, because she's really working in with an awful lot of agricultural and land right organizations. So actually it could be really interesting for us to be able to see, can we put you in touch with different groups with just something else to say. Thank you so much. Theo, I'm going to approach you. Would it be okay if you share with us some of your reflections on your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Theo, and I've been, I guess, a youth climate activist for about the last 2.5 years. I first got involved with climate activism in sort of January of 2019. There was a few different factors that led to it, but I think young people today, growing up, we always carry this awareness and this understanding of the climate crisis, and it is this sort of specter that is looming in the back of our minds, that's always there. It's something that you definitely do consider, at least I do, when thinking about the future. But it is also something that I had never felt that I could particularly do anything about. And I think that definitely changed when I saw that other young people were taking to the streets. And in particular, I saw, like many others, Greta's speech at COP24 in Katowice in Poland. And as such a small person, both in like physical stature and symbolically, the power and the significance that her speech had, and the effect it had in mobilizing young people who, many like her, would have been experiencing climate anxiety and fear for their future, seeing that, you know, nobody is too small to make a difference. That's something very potent and powerful. So that's one of the main reasons why I felt that I did something, and why I decided to try and do something. So in 2019, with a few other friends, I set up a youth climate activist group in Ireland called School Strikes for Climate. And we worked towards the March 15th strike in Dublin, when about, I think, 10,000 people, young and old, came to the streets in a demand for more climate action from the government. And since then, that group merged with Fridays for Future, which is the broader global youth climate movement, which has held strikes in pretty much every single country in the world, I think. And throughout all of 2019, we held a number of very large strikes. I think the September 20th one was close to 50,000 people across the island of Ireland. And around the world, it was millions across, two different dates, but millions of young people taking to the streets. And then towards the end of 2019, I had never been intending to go to COP because it would have been in Chile, so travel to it wouldn't have been possible in a low carbon fashion. But when at the last moment it was moved to Madrid, I felt that it would be important that as many climate activists, and especially youth climate activists, would be there to have our voices heard. And I also, at a personal level, I had an interest in seeing the UN process and how it all worked. So I went to COP25 in Madrid. I traveled there by ferry and then by train. And I was there for the whole 2 weeks. And I went there with a friend of mine and a fellow activist, C from Cork, who's also from Fridays for Future. And I think both of us had this sort of perhaps rose-tinted view of the UN. I think because it's slightly further removed from our everyday life than our own governments. We expected and we hoped that there would be a greater commitment to climate action and to climate justice. And unfortunately, we were very much disappointed by what we saw at COP and the way in which negotiations took place. And indeed, the whole event itself was something that really didn't sit right with me. The urgency and the immediacy of the climate crisis that I think young people really feel and understand, that was not present at COP in any form. The negotiations were that there was no understanding of that immediacy at all. It was all discussions of far off dates and pushing around responsibility, in particular to lower income nations who have no historical responsibility for the climate crisis and who don't have the capability to shoulder that burden. In particular, I remember one negotiation that I sat in on where I think for the whole 2 hours that I was there, the discussions were revolving entirely around what the meeting should be called, whether it should be called a multilateral, a bilateral, or whether they needed to invent a new term to describe the meeting. And I think that that anecdote really sums up for me my experience of what COP25 was. And I think the fact that there have been 25 COPs, soon to be 26, and that there has been no real meaningful progress on curbing emissions really speaks to the failure of the UN process and the failure of the UN climate process. And I think as young people in engaging with COP and with climate action on an international level, we do really need to continue to highlight what really is a catastrophic failure. We're only in the situation we are in now because of how badly things have been messed up by our governments and by the UN. So yeah, I think for me, the COP was really an experience that opened my eyes to the fact that there's no one out there who's going to fix everything for us. If we want action, we really do need to demand it at a local level, at a national level, and at an international level. And we have to understand that these authorities, these government bodies, they do not have the capability of solving the climate crisis without us. Climate action really does need to come from the people, and it needs to be something that reaches a point where it is inevitable. And before the COVID pandemic, I think we were approaching that point. I certainly felt that there was a real sense of urgency that was emerging. And unfortunately, that sort of slipped to the wayside. But my hope is that we will be able to reinvigorate that, and that we will be able to really put pressure on governments so that it's impossible to ignore us and impossible to ignore the climate crisis anymore.
Thank you so much, Theo. That was wonderful. Really great insights, and I think really great to hear the journey of how you came about in your reflections. And yeah, that disillusion, I share it. I was similar to my own experience of going. But MARUŠKA, will I hand over to you?
Yeah, thank you. I have some pictures to show. I don't know if someone will.
Valerie, I think you have them.
Mm-hmm. Ah, great. So yeah, I'm Marija or MARUŠKA, as you prefer. I have two names. I've been involved with the climate movement, and particularly through the COP from 2012, when I got involved with Young Friends of the Earth Europe through my organization in Croatia, Friends of the Earth Croatia. I was then a volunteer in our activist group. And the first event that I participated in was called, and you can see first picture, Qatar in Brussels. So this was an event that we organized in parallel with the COP in Qatar that year. And since it was on another continent, we didn't want to fly a bunch of, young Europeans there and contribute more to emissions. We rather decided to stay in Europe, and particularly Brussels, where the decision makers for the European Union are, and to try to do something from there. And there were, I think, maybe 60 or even more young Europeans. And it was throughout, I think 1 week or a bit more that took place. And we have many workshops on a daily basis. As you can see in this picture, we would connect. We had a couple of our people, let's say, from Young Friends of the Earth Europe at the COP, that we could get daily updates from what's happening and what we can do in support from Brussels. Next picture, please. And that's what we did. We tried to organize actions in response to what's happening there. And that time it was a big typhoon, hurricane that hit the Philippines. And it was around, actually it was around Christmas that the COP took place, before Christmas. And we try to raise awareness on the streets of Brussels of what's happening, and that, like Theo said, the urgency and the COP process, it's a very different thing, and that it was lacking ambition, and that we need action now. So these were kind of events that we organized a few times when the COP was outside of Europe. And maybe if you can skip to Lima in Brussels, just a few pictures after. I did them in wrong order. More. Yeah, more. Just to show you these events, yeah, here. So it was this was in 2014, Lima in Brussels, when the COP was in Peru, and we did the same thing. Basically, there were even more young people from so many countries in Europe. It was very, I think these events are also kind of empowering for us, and that we can actually do something. Even though we are far away from the COP, but here we went in front of the European Commission again to stand in solidarity, because there was again a big typhoon that hit the Philippines, and we emphasized that the target of the European Union was not enough what they were pledging at the COP. So we used this event to, as Europeans, to hold European Union accountable as a major, emitter and contributor to climate change, and the driver of climate change, basically. Next pictures, please. Yeah, we also decided to, this was a very interesting and quite radical action, let's say, for us back then. We went into the European Investment Bank, a few of us, to emphasize the big influence of the industry and the finance sector as well in financing further fossil fuel extraction and fossil fuel projects, and to emphasize the fact that there is huge dirty industry presence and influence at the COP. So we went inside, but also next picture. We were there in front with different messages, and yeah, emphasizing that we need fossil fuels out of the COP. Next picture. I think there is more. Yeah, we also tried to bring in the local context. So here we joined a local march in Brussels that was annual, and it was against the killing of environmental and human rights defenders. And this is very much important in the context of climate change and how many people are killed by corporations and military, particularly in the global south. So it's important in these kind of events that you actually connect with the local movements, so that you're not completely disconnected from what's happening where you are at the moment. Next picture. Yeah, and also we did like quick actions. This was in front of Shell, also because, like I said, there's huge industry presence at the COPs. Yeah, so we can go back now for the first pictures. So just to tell you, I was at a couple of here at a couple of COPs, and this was actually the COI, the youth gathering before the COP in Warsaw in 2013, and it was a very inspirational event. There were a lot of workshops and actions, and young people from over the world connecting. And I think this was very important moment to show youth voices, and to actually also use this moment to prepare our strategy and what we're going to do during the COP. Next picture. Yeah, so this was in Warsaw, where yet again Philippines were struck by a hurricane and many people died. And this was actually a big, like quite ad hoc action. Actually, Yeb Sano, who was then the delegate for the government of Philippines, started a hunger strike because of lack of course, support and action around climate change, and the fact that many countries in the global south have been suffering for years. So actually it was youth, us, the young people, who decided to support him in the hunger strike and also to participate at a level as we all could. Like not everyone was completely on hunger strike. Some of us just during the period when we were there at the COP, so most of the day. So in this way, we wanted to show our solidarity and support, and to bring the media and world's attention to it. And then there was very big attention to this. Next picture. Yeah, and like I said, like during the COP, we organized a lot of actions, sometimes 2 per day, and you had to be really quick to plan it and to make the different banners. So you know, you actually get used to it quite quickly. It's quite exhausting, but it's very empowering, and you know, to do this together and to feel that you can do something, even if it's not, you know, a major thing. But yeah, so this was, so as we were in Warsaw, and as you know, it's the land of coal, and there was huge coal industry presence at the COP. And, you know, there are always deals being done behind the doors. So we try to use also creative tools to do actions and creative methods. So we did also a kind of performance here. Next pictures. Yeah, so like I said, we can go to next picture. There were a lot of actions, and this is very important. We did also at the Brussels events. As young Europeans, we would often also do actions that are targeting the European Union, and like I said, holding them accountable. And this was basically trying to get them to be the leader as they're saying they are, which, you know, is not actually the truth, but trying to push them to do it. So we can go quicker through the maybe photos, just to show that we also as young people could participate at press conferences of the international civil society. Next picture. Yeah, more actions. Also important to say that we had as well our delegates inside the COP, but also it was important to be present outside and to do actions outside and to connect with the local movements and organizations. So this was also targeting different corporations that were present at COP. One creative action that we did also regarding the coal industry. Next pictures, please. There were big march always during the COP where we participated, and was always a very empowering moment. Next pictures. Yeah, also important to say that we use the fact that we're there to also confront and to connect with other social issues. I think it's important to say as a climate justice movement, we are also social justice movement, and this was particularly regarding Frontex, the European border guard, which is, yeah, as you know, very racist and when it comes to refugees. And this was a big moment where at the Warsaw COP, we symbolically walked out of the COP as the whole civil society, all the movements agreed to do it because of the too big influence of the dirty industry at the COP. So yeah, next pictures. Yeah, we can skip those. And also, yeah, Theo already mentioned the future COPs and the COP in Paris, which was particularly important. And just, I think, to say for the end is that it can feel disempowering to be there and to see how big it is, and that you don't have such a big influence. But I think it's important to say that civil society presence there, especially youth presence and radical messages and actions, is important, because without us there, many bad decisions would have been made. And I think the negotiations would have been, you know, Paris Agreement would not be there. Probably the 1.5 target was there because we pressured the governments and the science community to put it there, because, you know, without us, I think the process would be even much slower, and there would not be maybe Fridays for Future now, and let's say, and you know, everything, you know, there was a big momentum being built for the past 20 years to where we are now, and, you know, a lot of work. But I think youth presence is so important there, and not just at the COP, at the conference, like I said, but also there on the streets, at home. You also can do small actions, big actions, and connected to your local context. So I think, we can do a lot if, you know, we want to.
Thank you so much, Mariška. And I think it's also really important that what we've seen from, you know, each of our panelists, from their experiences, the different things that they did in terms of going inside the negotiation. So if you have a badge like that one that Ruth was showing us from Dipty's badge earlier, so if you're going inside the negotiations, and the kinds of actions. So those photographs that Mariška just showed there, of a lot of those images were actually inside the negotiation, so in the halls of where these decisions are being made. And then there was kind of things that were happening outside, you know, so you might have seen that. I was looking at a lot of the things because the year that I went in Warsaw, like, I was outside, I didn't have a badge to go inside. And so we did a lot of actions outside on the streets in Warsaw. So, you know, things like finding hooks, you know, so a lot of the corporate influence, so going to different corporate headquarters and things like that, you know, there's ways that young people can kind of go and be creative and innovative, you know, with wherever you are, or even the example of, you know, when you're not even at the COP at all, you're not there in person, you're not inside with a badge, you're not outside on the streets, but you're also maybe organizing your own event and what you can do in your country. So I know Mariška showed a couple of photographs of, like, in Brussels events that we held, you know, so it was like coming together and trying to harness that. And I think what's great is looking at experiences like THEO had and Claire, like here in Ireland, and what kind of they had done and the journeys they had to get them to that point of going, and then what can be done again and be brought back. So I think it's really interesting. I think the fact that Glasgow's so close, I think there's an awful lot of opportunity with us at the moment. But I think they've given us an awful lot to think about and a lot to visualize and to see and to imagine, especially for those of us who maybe haven't gone to COP before. But I want to open it up and see, do people have any burning questions?